Hi guys, and welcome back to the Now Listening To podcast. Hopefully by now, I have been uploading more consistently, as in back to my once a week schedule. I am currently fighting my demons, as we discussed in last week's episode. Having a rough time right now, but trying to course correct. That seems to be the endless loop of my life, basically. But anyway, just to get ahead of a few things, not in our usual setup. I'm currently in my family office because my parents are in the process of selling the house that we currently live in, and because of that, my whole podcast studio setup is packed away, and my mic and my lighting, as you can tell, the production value has never been super high here at Now Listening To, but particularly right now, it's more of a laid back kind of vibe. It's probably going to be like that for the next 2-3 episodes. I might be able to get my mic and my lighting back, but in terms of setup, that will not be refreshed until February. So we're just working with what we've got. So yeah, that's why we're doing Tiny Mic today and why I am in a different spot than usual. Also, just give me some grace if the audio is not great. Either feel free to skip this one. I don't know if I'm going to use the mic audio yet or just the video audio for this episode. But anyway, this week's episode is a much more chill vibe. That is why I am not wearing any makeup, and I'm also wearing my house clothes. This crew neck that I've been in for approximately the past 2 to 3 days because the entire East Coast has had a giant snowstorm. So I've just been stuck in my house. Not complaining, just stating matter of fact. But anyway, today's episode is one I'm actually really excited about. So as I've touched on across this podcast, saying that it's music focused and that not every episode is about strictly music, past couple of episodes I feel like I've deviated a little bit away from music, especially the past 3. But today I'm going to be doing my 2024 GoodReads Reading Challenge recap, and along with that, as the year was going on and I was reading, I assigned a song to every book that I read this past year. Currently, I still feel like it is 2024. My brain has not kind of made the shift yet to it being 2025. So this will be kind of me wrapping up last year. And like I said, I have a degree in literature. I studied literature in college, and I kind of started hating reading. I didn't do it for pleasure anymore. So one of my goals this past year was to get more into reading. So I won't even delay it. Yeah, I was a literature student, always been an arts and humanities girl, if that wasn't obvious, considering I run a music podcast, almost went to music school, never will let you guys forget that, and have a degree in literature. So anyway, here are 13 of the, spoiler alert, 20 books I read in 2024. Just because some of them are, like I mentioned, packed away already. I actually had to dig these ones out, and I just didn't feel like getting, some of them were like entire series. So, not to bury the lead. But basically, what I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to go through all the books that I read this year. I'm going to tell you what my rating of them was, and I'm undecided, so we'll see how the video goes, but I might either give each book like a 2-word description, just like 2 adjectives, or like a 1 sentence. But yeah, I will do that, tell you what my rating on GoodReads was, and then tell you the song I assigned to it and why. And I will just get ahead of it. Some of the songs that I assigned to the books are not necessarily like, oh, the lyrics match up with the story that was told. It was more like if I was listening to a song over and over again while I was reading one of these books, I associate that song with the book now, even if it doesn't match. So this would be a fun video because I'm nosy and I like seeing what other people read too. I'm a fiend for Spotify Wrapped and for GoodReads, but I don't have a lot of friends on GoodReads, so it's more of a personal endeavor at the moment. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into the books. The first books I read in 2024 was a reread of the Hunger Games trilogy, not to include Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I still have yet to read that because my sister said she's going to read it, and here we are a year later and she still hasn't finished it. I got it for her for last Christmas, like her last Christmas gift. So, yeah, I reread those 3 books. I will give a brief description of the trilogy. It's pretty self-explanatory. Try to keep it to like 1 sentence. I think I'm gonna alternate between, since this is a series, I'm just gonna give a description of the series, but for the one-off books, I might do 2 adjectives. Anyway. The Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins is a dystopian world where 2 underage children are sent into an arena to die, basically, and then there's usually 1 winner. Well, I'm giving the most butchered description of the Hunger Games series. There's 1 winner, they all have to like fight to the death, 1 winner from 1 district, and then they're the victor for that year. And then a lot of other shit goes on. There's a lot of social commentary about dystopia and the way the government functions and oligarchies and etc., etc. So actually a pretty fictionally relevant trilogy, especially today. Okay, so what did I give the ratings for these? I gave the entire trilogy 5 out of 5 stars because I read those books when I was in middle school, and I had like an unhealthy obsession with Josh Hutcherson and Peeta Mellark, as well as Jennifer Lawrence. And I dressed up, like I wanted to dress up as Katniss Everdeen one year for Halloween, like it was that serious. And also I was so mentally ill this past year, like this time the past year, that I literally did a Katniss Everdeen cosplay, like DIY cosplay in my room for no purpose on a random Saturday. Apparently that seems to be a cycle of like mental illness in the winter for me, but anyway, yeah, I ranked those all 5 out of 5 stars, and I would again. They're very nostalgic for me, but they're also like, now that I have a different lens to view literature through, they hold up, or like they're written really well, and I enjoyed reading them again. And Suzanne Collins knows how to build a plot. Yeah, so anyway, the 3 songs I assigned in consecutive order, so Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. Smoke Signals by Phoebe Bridgers for the Hunger Games because it's giving District 12. The Less I Know the Better for Catching Fire. I know that song's about a love triangle, but the lyrics kind of fit the vibe of everybody being on different pages of understanding. And then Cough Syrup by Young the Giant. Oh, I didn't say, okay, The Less I Know the Better is by Tame Impala. That's pretty, I might have said that. Anyway, my brain's not on right now. And then Cough Syrup by Young the Giant. I don't know exactly why I picked this one. Let me look at the lyrics. I think this one was more of a vibe. Like, the lyrics kind of give a little, but I think it was more the vibe that I was going off of. So anyway, those were my first 3 books. All 5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, a very solid start to the year. I was like, oh, I read 3 books in 1 week. I'm gonna have a great year reading-wise. Not so much. But anyway, moving swiftly along to the non-trilogy books that I read. I read How to Focus by a Vietnamese author that I do not know how to pronounce his name at this point in time. I will insert a pronunciation on the screen. A book called How to Focus. So originally I found the book How to Love at a museum, like the Museum of Modern Art in Dublin, Ireland. And I wanted to buy that book because the cover was cute, because for whatever reason, art museum gift shops always force my hand in terms of consumerism. I will always buy something from an art gift shop. So anyway, I wanted that book because it was cute, but I never ended up reading it or buying it. And so last year I was like, oh, like I should circle back and see. The reviews on it weren't great, but then this one popped up, which was How to Focus. And I cannot do that very well, and I was trying to refine that at the beginning of last year, because I'm a very ambitious person, but I think I touched on this in last week's episode. My brain is always at odds with itself. It's like I'm very ambitious, but I can't stay focused on something, or I get really upset that I'm not perfect at something right away. So I thought How to Focus might be a good book for me to read. And I also think I was doing 75 hard this time last year. I actually definitely was doing 75 hard this time last year, which the winter is quite possibly the worst time to do that challenge, by the way. And also, it's just not sustainable, so not worth it. But that's a side tangent. So I think I chose to read this book because part of 75 hard is you have to read 10 pages of a nonfiction book, or if you, depending how you bend the rules, a book a day. So that was like the first one that I chose to read. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, which is, I still feel that way now. The reason I gave it a pretty low rating is because I was expecting it to be more practical, like clinical advice of like, here are things that are scientifically proven to help you focus better. I don't know why I thought that, considering the other book that I wanted to read by him was called How to Love. So I should have kind of understand that it would be more of a like philosophical, spiritual kind of ordeal. That's exactly what it was. It was a lot about meditation and stuff like that. I have tried meditating in the past. I don't knock anyone that it works for, like, more power to you. I just don't think it's a great coping mechanism, especially for focus for me. I think it just makes me tired. And I have a busy brain, and meditation, I just don't. I've tried it a couple times. I haven't noticed that it works amazingly for me, and so the book was kind of a bust in terms of actual practical ways to help me focus. I gave this one, or the track I assigned for this one, is Retire Final by Alvedon. Don't know this young gentleman, but that's almost 3 years ago. Almost 3 summers ago, I was having a really hard time focusing on the books that I read for my dissertation, and my friend at the time said that he told me he listened to this track when he studies because he also kind of has a busy brain, and listening to music with words is just not conducive to studying. So he recommended this song, and I kid you not, I listened to this song on repeat every time I read one of my books for dissertation, or for my dissertation that I wrote my last year of college, and it's probably one of the only reasons I finished the book. So I just put that one there because it reminds me of focusing, but it has really nothing to do with the book itself. I guess it could be like a meditation song if you really wanted to spin it. But next up is my favorite book that I read this entirety of this past year. So let me find the rating. I better have given it 5 out of 5 stars because otherwise it's wrong. Okay, I did. The next book that I read in 2024 was Remarkably Bright Creatures, and it's my favorite book I read in a very, very long time, and I recommend it to basically everyone I meet now if they ask for a book to read, because I think a lot of people like it, and that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed it so much. I wrote an extremely long book review on GoodReads on this one, but I'll do 2 words for this one, even though it is quite literally my favorite book I read this past year. I will describe it as bittersweet and wholesome. Those are the 2 words I would use to describe Remarkably Bright Creatures. Yeah, I love that book. It's so good. I actually probably should reread it this year because it's really good. I will say, I do remember when I started it, it took about like 20-page seal for the seal to break. Usually I give a book 100 pages before I decide whether I'm going to not finish it or keep going. This book took about 20 pages to break that 100-page seal. So anyway, my favorite book I read by far, and I recommend it to literally every single one of my friends. The song I assigned to this one was less to do with the content-ish of the actual novel itself, and was more kind of a vibe I was trying to emulate. So basically, Remarkably Bright Creatures is set in the Pacific Northwest, And so I was trying to find a song that fit the vibe of Pacific Northwest to me. So, and also at this time last year, a song that I was listening to a lot was Cleopatra by the Lumineers. And so that is a song I chose for Remarkably Bright Creatures. It just fit the vibe of Pacific Northwest to me. And that's kind of like, the setting was a very evocative feature of Remarkably Bright Creatures. And that's all I'll say, because I could go on and talk. I'll put a picture on the screen for my visual listeners. I bought a octopus jellycat and I named him Marcellus after the main narrator, or one of the main narrators in the book, like point of views, is Marcellus the octopus that's at the aquarium. Anyway, yeah, that Cleopatra by the Lumineers, because based off of vibes only. Okay, I have never read the Twilight series. I went through a phase in college where I was very obsessed, but it was not one of those like nostalgic book series I read as a kid. I was very much a Divergent, Hunger Games. I think those are like the big ones that I read. I never read any of the Twilight books, and then my best friend Emily introduced me to the Twilight sphere via the movies when I was in college. So I read Twilight that summer after Emily first showed me the movies, but I never got around to reading the rest of the books because, hey, they're fucking long, and newsflash, I actually didn't like reading them that much. I thought they weren't written that well. New Moon, I rated it a 4. That seems high. But one thing about me, and I hate to say it because his character is very flawed, but literally, arguably so is every character in that franchise, I am a Jacob Black apologist, and that's the hill that I'll have to die on, but I think that's why I like New Moon better. Yeah, I really don't have anything else to say. What would be the 2 words I'd give the description of this book? If y'all don't know what Twilight is, you've been living under a rock. Sorry for the intermission, guys. We're going to be using audio today because my microphone, unbeknownst to me, stopped recording about 10 minutes ago. So, sorry for the shitty audio. Anyway, I gave up on the tiny mic. I don't think it would have been that much better. We were talking about New Moon. 2 words I would use to describe New Moon are childish and tumultuous, I guess. Yeah, childish and tumultuous. Yeah. And what I was looking up before is the pronunciation of this band, because I've heard it pronounced different ways, and I don't want to say it wrong. But basically, long story short, the song I selected for this one, also I don't know if I said it, I think I did, I rated New Moon a 4, which seems awfully high to me compared to what I rated Eclipse, as I already said. But I went basic on this one, and I did Rosalind by Bon Iver. That's how I pronounce it, but I've also heard people pronounce it Bon Iver. So whichever is correct, I'm not trying to start a debate, I'm just trying to say the name of the song. And St. Vincent is the other artist. That's on the New Moon soundtrack, so it's kind of a cop-out, but I love that song anyway, and it perfectly fits the vibe because it was made for the movie. Next up in the lineup was probably the most heartbreaking book I read of 2024. Ooh, it's like literally bringing tears to my eyes. That book is so sad. I read A Little Life, and that was probably second to Remarkably Bright Creatures. I think that was like my other favorite book I read this year. So long though. Definitely should have counted as at least 2 books. I also don't know if I said this at the beginning because I cannot follow a linear train of thought. My original goal for 2024 reading challenge on GoodReads was to read 24 books, which was 2 books every month, and then it took me 3 months to read A Little Life because it's 800 pages and I can't focus. And similarly to Remarkably Bright Creatures, there was definitely a seal where I was kind of stuck in the first 200 pages for a while, like, when does this start getting good? I don't know if good is the way I would describe it now. Maybe like earth-shatteringly heartbreaking would be how I describe it. But anyway, a song I listened the fuck out of when I was reading that book was The Pool by Steven Sanchez, and I actually do think it fits the love story. I don't know if that's a word I would use. I think it accurately describes the relationship, both platonic and romantic, between Jude and Willem. So much so that when I hear that song, like, I can only think of that book. What 2 words would I use to describe A Little Life? I think I already said it, but it's kind of a 2 for 1. Earth-shatteringly heartbreaking. But beautiful nonetheless. And I've also seen a lot of really negative criticism about that book, which I think is fair, but also I really like that book, so I don't have a bad word to say about it. What did I rate A Little Life, if I can see now? I gave it a 4 out of 5. And the review that I wrote was, have not cried this hard from anything in over a year. It's because I've been repressing my emotions. We don't need to talk about it. Devastatingly beautiful and expertly written. And I stand by that. Moving swiftly along. What was the next book I read? Ooh, this was a good one. This is how I found one of my favorite authors of the year. This was the book that I brought with me on my family vacation to the beach this past summer in August. And it was rather fittingly named Beach Read by Emily Henry. That woman knows how to write a romance novel. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. If they could do half ratings on GoodReads, I'd probably give it 4.5. It was just not a perfect 5 for me. I can't put exactly my finger on why that is, but it was not a perfect 5. But it was incredible, and according to my review, sweet and simple read that consumed my vacation and kept me up late reading for the first time in a very long time. Looking forward to reading more of her repertoire after this one, which, spoiler alert, I did, right at the tail end of the year. But anyway, the 2 words I would describe Beach Read: inquisitive and cheeky. I don't know. The trope that Emily Henry usually uses, at least in the first 2 books of hers that I've read, are the grumpy cat boyfriend and like golden retriever girlfriend kind of vibe, sort of. For the second one I read, but definitely for this one. I don't know where I was going with that. That was the trope. I'm a sucker for that trope, and it was, I'd say maybe kind of like a spin-off of Enemies to Lovers, but it's not really enemies. Like, both of the Emily Henry books I read this year were not true enemies, in my opinion. Moving along. The song I chose for Beach Read was Marcel by Hers, rest in peace to them. But Marcel is the most beachiest, like, road trip song I've ever heard. Like, the first time I ever listened to that song, I was like, oh, this is meant for, like, a road trip. So that's the Beach Read song that I chose. The theme song. What is next in my lineup? That's hilarious that it took me that long to read another book. And by that long, I mean between August and October. So there was definitely a slump at some point afterwards. Oh, that's right, when I launched a podcast, so that would make sense. This book is kind of a joke. This is a series I read as a kid. Not similarly to Hunger Games. This was like more elementary level reading. But if any of y'all have ever read any of the Geronimo Stilton series or the Thea Stilton Thea Sisters series, I was visiting Laura and Kana in Seattle. Also, sorry if I'm scratching my scalp so much. I think the hair dye like made my head itch, so that's why I keep scratching my head, but it's not lice, I promise. I literally, yeah, it's just the hair dye. But anyway, I was at a bookstore in Seattle with Laura and Kana, and we were in the kids section, and I saw that they had the Thea Sisters books, and they had a new one that was not available when I was reading those books, and it was like $8. So of course I had no choice but to read it, or to purchase and read it. So the next on my list is Thea Stilton Roman Holiday, or Thea Stilton, the Thea Sisters Roman Holiday. What did I give this one out of curiosity? I feel like I probably gave it like a 5 out of 5 as a joke. No, okay, this is accurate to what I actually thought of the book. It was a 3 out of 5. Compared to other Thea Stilton books I've read, it was not the best one. It was not what I wanted it to be, basically. The words I would give it, and it is a children's book, so I can't judge it too harshly, but reading it as a 22-year-old, the words I would use to describe it are predictable and comforting, because I read those books when I was a kid, revise. Predictable and nostalgic. That's the reason I read the book. And also kind of just to boost my read count. And rather fittingly, I had to use this song as its theme song, Roman Holiday by Nicki Minaj. So, enough said there. And like I said, I gave it 8, or like I said, maybe I didn't say. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Okay. Again, moving swiftly along. Okay, here's one that I take issue with a little bit. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I read this book again because the aforementioned indie artist that I have quite an affinity for had talked about this book online, like on his Instagram a couple of times, and I was like, oh, well, he really liked it, so, like, and then I think I have, like, 3 or 4 other really, like, booky friends that also had read it, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a whirl. It is not, like, I'm not really into kind of the, like, dark academia vibe of the book. I was not a huge fan of the book. I'll be completely honest, and it took me ever to finish it. It's like 500 pages. I literally think in my review I was like, this book could have been told in like 250. Yeah, it was not my favorite book. Let me just read some snippets from my review, because I wrote a really long review on this book. Here's the situation. This book conceptually is very appealing, and a lot of bookheads I know have strongly recommended it, as I said. Linguistically and narrative-wise, the story was very well written, and I understand why so many people call it a modern classic. Exactly. In my personal opinion, this book was over 500 pages and could have easily been told in 350. Okay, I shaved off an extra 100 for dramatic effect, but yeah. I felt like I was sitting in anticipation throughout the otherwise unnecessary filler plot until the climax, and then the same dragging of the feet anticipation until the last 100 pages where literally everything happens every other sentence. And also I just really can't get on board with the elitism of the book. Yeah, that was way more than 2 words to describe it. If I had to just give it 2 words, I'd describe it as elitist and, like, drawn out. Elitist and drawn out. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Just because it's not that the book is bad, it is just I have a lot of big criticisms of it plot-wise, and also, like, some of the language that was used, I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? And, like, the incest vibes, and just, like, there's so many things about it that I'm just like, you know what? This book is for other people. This book is not for me. That being said, I actually really like the song I picked for this one because it's just the vibes, like the creepy, sinister vibes, really fit. I picked Call It Fate, Call It Karma by The Strokes. I think this song, like, perfectly fits the vibe of The Secret History. I'm glad that I finished it and that I tiptoed outside of my, like, comfort realm reading-wise. Same with A Little Life. I actually didn't really want to read that book at all because I was like, oh, that's going to destroy me. It did, but in a good way. The Secret History, I'm glad I read it so that I can have my own opinion, because otherwise I would have just assumed it was an amazing book. not my personal opinion, but that's okay. But yeah, that's The Secret History. Next up in the lineup is A Gentle Reminder, which is kind of like an affirmation book of like just a gentle reminder to be kind to yourself, to take like things in life that are worthwhile take time and are difficult, and that whatever your path of healing and growth is appropriate to you. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because I genuinely, like, there's not really anything that I would change about it. I said it was genuinely a beautifully written piece that I happened to read right when I needed it. This was kind of the start of my tumultuous mental health things popping back up towards the latter half of the year. It felt very redundant at some points, but this is not really a book that you read in one sitting. So basically, this is a point that I was like, oh shit, there's no way I'm going to reach my rating goal. I need to pump through these. And this was more of like a short story. I think it was like 200 something pages. So it's not a book that you should read in one sitting. I wouldn't recommend reading it that way. I feel like it's more of a pick it up as you need a reminder. I read it all at once though. So I said it was a little bit redundant, but I was also reading it in one sitting, so that was probably why. Yeah, I really like that book. I gave it a 5 out of 5. And the song I chose for that one was For Once in My Life by Stevie Wonder, because it touches a lot on like what your expectations of romantic love could and should look like. And I feel like everything they describe in the book aligned with how I view romantic love, and For Once in My Life just felt like it fit, so I picked that one. Next up in the lineup, which was arguably the hardest book for me to finish. I started this book last summer and I didn't finish it. Like, I thought I was gonna DNF it. Did not finish, by the way. That's what DNF, for all my non-bookies out there. Yeah, I started this book in July and I didn't finish it until December 9th. And that was only because I used an audiobook to help me finish reading it. Yeah, I gave it a 2 out of 5. I'm just not a huge fan of Stephenie Meyer's plot development. And I also think it's because I already watched the movie, so I kind of already knew what was going to happen. That was another component. And yeah, it just like, that one dragged on forever. It was not a favorite of mine. Which is why I was so shocked when I just saw my review of New Moon, because I did not expect it to be that high, but apparently it was just Eclipse that I really didn't like, but I think it's going to be a while until I read Breaking Dawn, if I can be so completely honest. Even though I do know that one is different than the movie. The song I chose for Eclipse was Can I Be Him by James Arthur. I feel like it's rather fitting the love triangle of it all. And that's all I have to say on that one. Next up in my lineup, what book is next? Oh, okay. The next book I read was another series of short stories. The book was called Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and I rated it did I rate it a 3 or a 4? I rated it a 5. I thought I rated it a 4. But anyway, this was like a magical realism twist on like realistic fiction, and newsflash, I wrote my dissertation on magical realism, so I enjoyed that kind of callback to my academic career. But yeah, I really liked it. It's set in a Japanese cafe, and it's like the magical realism is like an old folktale where you can go back in time, but it doesn't change anything, etc., etc. Yeah, so what was I gonna say? Oh, my 2-word description would be let's see what I wrote in my review. Tear-jerking and heartwarmingly humanitarian. That's 3 words, but Yeah, and I gave it a 5. I thought I gave it a 4, but I stand by 5. I said it reminded me a lot of my favorite book that I read this year. It was definitely giving Remarkably Bright Creatures vibes. That's, I think, what I meant by that. And the song I chose for it was Oh What a World by Casey Musgraves, because it's just like introspective, and I think that fits like, what's the point of going back in time if it doesn't change anything? And kind of the decision-making process behind that, and the sentimentality of human beings and everything like that. So that's why I picked that one. We are nearing the end. I am starting to feel like this video idea was a little bit boring, or this episode idea was a little bit boring, but bear with me. Next one I read was The American Roommate Experiment. Yeah, it's the second book in the Spanish Love Deception series by Elena Armas, but it's about like secondary characters. Didn't know that. I actually got this book at the beginning of December in New York with Laura and Kana, my best friends that have been on the podcast, because it was one of the blind date books, which like, New York is the place for me to live, because every fucking bookstore I went into, I had to buy something. And so these are the blind date books, and I think they were described as a slow burn rom-com set in New York. So we picked that one. And rather unfortunately, the male lead in that book's name is basically my brother's name. It's Lucas Martin, and my brother's name is Lucas Martin. The only difference is that my brother's name is spelled with a K. So I thought that was going to be really hard to overlook, but I ended up actually enjoying that book far more than I thought I would. I gave it a 4 out of 5, because let me see what I said. As much as I would like to sit here and say something like the characters were very juvenile and the plot was very predictable and you could anticipate what was coming, I also read almost 300 of the 385 pages in one sitting. So yeah, I was right. I would describe this as predictable. I think I used that for another description. Predictable, but enjoyable. Yeah, I liked it. It was incredibly cheesy, and I think for portraying adults, the characters were very, very juvenile and not developed in a complex way, or like the author was attempting to develop the characters in a complex way, but it just came across as like, I don't know, trying to add plot where it didn't need to be added. Whereas, for example, with my now favorite romance author, Emily Henry, she develops her characters very well. So, yeah, predictable but enjoyable. And then the song I chose was Rosas by La Oreja de Van Gogh, because the main character's name is Rosie and Lucas Martin is Spanish, so goes without saying. Next book I read was another one I got in New York, that was called Tiny Love Stories, True Tales of Love in 100 Words or Less. This one was, I think, a like amalgamation of, I think they do Tiny Love Stories in New York Times. I think that's what it's from. It's either New York Times or the New Yorker. So basically people had submitted these and then they just compiled them all into a book. It was like 200 something pages. It was sweet, but also a lot of the stories were like earth-shatteringly heartbreaking. I didn't expect them to be. Yeah, earth-shatteringly heartbreaking seems to be the word of the day. But I rated it a 4 out of 5 because I am a hopeless romantic and a sucker for lovey-dovey shit. There was one specific one, I don't remember the exact excerpt, but I can put it on the screen for anyone who's watching on YouTube. Yeah, what are the words I would use to describe it? Beautiful and human. Those are the words I would use to describe it. And the song I chose was When You Wash Your Hair by Matt Maltese. That song just feels very romantic, but then the words itself aren't entirely. Which kind of I feel like fit the vibe of the book, because there were some like more tragic stories that were being told that I was like, I don't know if I would describe this as a love story personally. moving swiftly along. How many do we have left? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 left, but one of them I didn't put a song because it just felt kind of insensitive, so I'll get to that one. Oh, that's the next one. The next book I read, this one we'll just breeze past because I didn't pick a song for it because it just, like I said, felt a little out of touch if I were to, was So You Want to Talk About Race. I've had that book since 2020 when kind of the Black Lives Matter movement reached a crescendo after George Floyd's passing, and I think I got like 100 pages into it, and then I just kind of put it on my bookshelf and I did not return to it the entire time I was in college. So I was like, oh, I have this book and I haven't finished it. And like, never a bad thing to educate yourself. So yeah, I read that one. I think I gave it a 5 out of 5. It's different than rating like the enjoyment of a book because that one was more educational, but I think I gave it a 5 out of 5 because I liked the way she discussed, just made it very digestible. Yeah, 5 out of 5. But pivoting swiftly along, the next book I read was Real Men Knit by Quena Jackson. I realize I've been saying some of the authors and not all of them, so my bad. But this was one I picked up in September. I went to New York twice this past year. I went in September for a one-night only show, and then I went in December for like Christmas in New York with my best friends and my sisters. This was when I went in September and we went to like a used bookstore and I found this on the shelves and I was like, I've literally never heard of this book and it's a romance novel, so why not? And I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5 potentially. Let me see what I wrote. I will say towards the end I stopped writing reviews on these books because I was just trying to get through them as fast as possible. I didn't take the time to write them. Also, this audio is going to be so fucking bad because my entire family's up here right now. I gave it a 4 out of 5, which I stand by that, and I would describe it as sense of community. That's my description. Sense of community. And sense of community, girl next door. That's the vibe of the book. And what song did I give it? Angie by Humble the Great. Just something about the vibe. Like, I literally can't put it to anything else besides like the vibe of the main two characters. Next up in the lineup, we're almost done, I swear to God. This is another one. I bought New York as someone who is planning on moving to New York in the near future, and getting that plan in motion. I picked this one up because I was like, oh, this seems like a good one to read. I picked I Love-ish New York, Tales of City Life by Ali Solomon. What was I gonna say? It was kind of like a mixture between a comic book and a chapter book and like a memoir also, all three, kind of recounting the entire time she lived in New York. And she still lives there now, but just how she navigated it throughout her whole life. I like that it was illustrated. I don't read a lot of books like that. I'd say, what words would I use to describe it? Funny and informative. Those are the words I would use to describe it. Funny and informative. And what did I rate this one? 5 out of 5. Yeah, I would stand by that. And the song I chose, gotta mention him again in this episode, of course. Positive by Stephen Dawes. It talks about moving to New York and expectations not exactly lining up with what you thought they would be. So I thought it was kind of fitting. And we're down to our last two, so let's power through. Or not last two, last three. Am I missing a song then? Oh no, it's just out of order. Yeah, it's just out of order. No worries there. yeah, Eclipse I gave a 2. And yeah, I did Eclipse. Okay, last 2. Book Lovers. It was so fucking good. It was another one that I like stayed up underneath my covers, phone flashlight on, like could not put that shit down. Couldn't put it down. It was so good. It was so good. I would describe it as Black Cat Shark. That's specific to the book if you've ever read it. Black Cat Shark vibe. It was so good. And the song I gave it was Harvest Moon by the Brothers Comatose. Because, not to spoil the book at all, but it is set in like small town southern state. So, or at least part of it is. That one was so good. I think I gave it a 5 out of 5. Yep, fittingly so. And last but not least of the 20 books I read this past year was Someone Else's Shoes by Jojo Moyes. And what rating? I gave that a 3 out of 5, and I would stick by that. I'd say the words I'd use to describe it are unexpected and sense of camaraderie, I guess. Or that's kind of long. Unexpected and empowering. Those are the words I would use to describe it. It was described to me as a romance novel. That was not the case. Not that I have any qualms with that. It was just not what I expected. But it was pretty good. And I chose as my final song of this video, Affection by Between Friends. This one was more of like a lyric vibe to fit the song. Yeah, so anyway, here are 13, this is just conveniently in the back the whole time, 13 of the 20 books I read this past year, and all the songs that I assigned them. I don't know if this format was great. I feel like I didn't execute it quite how I thought I was going to, but nonetheless, our current reading goal for this year is 25 because I want to one-up what my goal was for last year. I'm going to go about it more strategically, and on top of that, I will continue this playlist that I made for this past year for 2025's books so that we can do another recap like this next year. But anyway, yeah, those are my books. I'm not going to do Song of the Week this week because I just went through about 20 different songs for all of these. But anyway, if you guys enjoyed today's video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please be sure to give this show a thumbs up, rate it 5 stars, leave a comment if you want to, and follow the show because it helps me push it out to more people. And follow Now Listening to Pod on Instagram for whatever shenanigans I come up with there, and updates if something comes up with the podcast. But other than that, please bear with me through these trying times, aka moving for about the 1,500th time in my life. And yeah, I will catch you guys next week with a new episode. Love you guys. Smooches.